welcome everybody to Integrate Yourself. I'm your host, Allison, and you can find me at pureenergypdx.com. Today I'm with my coach and one of my favorite people, Hanna Bier. You can find her at hannabier.com. And she's going to, I'm just going to let her tell you exactly what she does and how she helps people. She's made a huge difference in my life. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Hanna, for all that you've helped me with.
Thanks so much, Allison. I'm so honored to be here. This is my third appearance on your podcast, and I'm always so excited when you ask me.
That is so great. I love it. Today we're going to talk about money, and if you wouldn't mind, just if some of my listeners haven't heard the other two podcasts you were on, which if you haven't, please go back and listen to it. I will reference them in the notes for this podcast. Hanna, can you just tell everybody real quickly what you do, how you help people?
Sure. So I'm an energy healer and family constellation therapist, and I work with people who have really big dreams for their lives, want to make a lot of money, be really free to travel, and have a lot of love and a lot of happiness and all those things. But they tend to all feel really stuck in actually making it happen. And many of my clients have already tried a lot of self-development, have read many books. Some of my clients have PhDs in psychology, and many people come to me almost like a last resort where they say, what the hell is going on? I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just not doing it. And so this is usually where I come in people's lives, and I help them fix their energy, and I help them bring their family systems into alignment and really get rid of all those inner blocks that keep people from accomplishing what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, that you've done that for me, and I'm just, it's just been amazing. I've seen a huge difference in my life because like we know, I guess from a there is something like we should know how to do these things, right? But we're not really taught. So that's kind of where that's where I was in the whole process, is like, I should know how to do this, but actually I've never really been taught the practical skills to direct my energy and focus in a way that really creates the reality that I really want and also deserve, like, because and that goes with many beliefs that we have that could be blocking really what we're wanting, what we're desiring in our life, which is important. So today, our subject, we're going to be talking about abundance and spiritually manifesting abundance. There are principles behind that, and I wanted to touch on that today with you, Hanna, as well as of course, talk about how you help people create abundance in their life. And we're going to focus more on money today. There are many different kinds of abundance, as we all know. But I'd like to focus on money today because I feel like that's a super important topic. Number one, because it's incredibly important to learn how to take care of yourself. And so I believe that creating money is like it's in that safety security zone of taking care of yourself. So if you can't do that, then that's a real problem. You can't really step out further than that. It's like you always feel this pullback to, if you want to step out, I guess, and what I'm trying to say is spiritually, or evolve or grow on a personal level, like there's some groundwork you have to do first, some foundational stuff. And I kind of consider creating money one of those things. What do you think, Hanna? Is that true for you as well?
Yeah, I really agree with you on that. Learning how to create money in your life, how to make money, how to be really wealthy is so, so, so important. And I also love what you said earlier about most of us never really learning how. Many of us grow up and we just don't know like what activities are needed for me to make a lot of money. How can I have a lot of profit? How can I let my wealth grow? How can I surpass my family system and make more money than them while feeling like I still belong? And it's actually a really tricky thing. And I found that for most people, it's not enough to just read a book on it, or it's not enough to just sit down and make a plan, because creating money it's a really big life skill that's so powerful to learn.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think it can be really hard also if you want to run a business and not know how, or the steps and the principles behind creating money and abundance in your life, right?
Hmm. And it's a stumbling block that comes up with so many people where they basically come to me and they say, I really shouldn't need this. I should know how to do this, which is completely crazy because if you knew how to do it, you would actually be doing it. So as long as you're not doing it, you probably don't really know how. So let's cut you some slack. And instead of expecting ourselves to know what we don't know, how about we just sit down and learn it? So for any of you guys who are listening and like some shame might already bubble up, just knowing that if your reality doesn't look the way you want it to, you're maybe just missing out on some skills that you need to learn.
Yeah, and I like that. I like how you say that because um then you take the shame and the blame of not like doing enough or being enough or all that emotional like baggage out of the mix, right? Because it's just, and this goes really for anything in life, and this is what you helped me realize, Hannah, is that it's about learning the skills, right? It's about learning the skills to do it, and there's nothing to there's no blame involved when you just haven't learned it yet. So you take the time to learn it and you practice it and play around with it, right? So that's what I really kind of how I want to start off with the conversation is like, what are some basic spiritual principles around creating abundance that you know of and that you teach your clients?
Hmm. One thing that many people aren't aware of that's really important to understand before we even think about increasing our income or increasing our wealth is to really be aware that the number one need of every single human being is to belong to their families. And that shows very strongly in people's finances. So, if, for those of you listening, if you just kind of think about the family system you were born into, how did you need to behave in order to fit in? And even if you rejected your family, even if you didn't agree with them all the way, there's always going to be a part of you that really wants to belong, that wants to be a part of your family. So kids who grow up in rich families have to earn a certain amount of money a month in order to belong, or they have to go into certain professions in order to belong. Children who grow up in, let's say, middle income families tend to stay within that same range. And you might consciously choose to surpass that, but then there's a deeper part of you that sabotages that. And this can happen in the most miraculous ways. So my clients call it the poltergeist syndrome, where it just feels like there is a poltergeist in their lives that causes them to lose money or to get sued or to get divorced and lose a lot of money or to just get sick so they can't work. We sabotage our earning potential in so many different ways. And that's because we have this deep, deep love towards our family. And actually, us belonging to our families is so much more important than being rich. Because without our families, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be able to live. We wouldn't be able to do anything because there's a felt sense that without our family, we would die. So think about how your finances are affected by the family system you were born into. And then from there, we can start to make changes. But the first most important thing is to recognize what's even influencing your finances. And about 90% of that is your family system.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when I thought about that, because it can be hard to break out of that pattern if you were around even like a certain, like if no one in your family was an entrepreneur and then you break out and want to be an entrepreneur, that's really breaking out of that family pattern. That takes a lot more of awareness, I think, to bring yourself in it out of that and not be pulled back into, oh, okay, well, this isn't going to work, or I'm not going to be able to make this work. And be able to step out and really become a successful entrepreneur, right? Or make more money than your parents did or your family did, right? Be that first person in that lineage. But yeah, I can imagine that on a very in a place that we're not very aware, we're gonna, because like love and belonging, of course, is the first thing, right? We all want to, like you said, belong to the family. That's a very important thing. It's about survival. So it's a huge thing. And like it was so amazing when I learned about that from you. The other thing I would say, like, I think you and I have talked about, now that we're since we're talking about family stuff, your relationship with your mother is very it directly affects your ability to trust that you're going to be taken care of, and I feel like that has a direct relationship with the abundance that you're attracting in your life, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So whenever somebody comes to me and they'll say, I have these weird money patterns, for some people it's, I just can't get past this certain income level. Like no matter how hard I try, I just can't go past it. Or some people say, I just make a lot and then I lose a lot. Or some people say, it just feels like money is always running through my fingers. I have some of my clients who earn a ton of money, but at the end of the day, they don't really have anything to show for. So there's this lack of actual profit. It's like they make
Mhm.
money and then they blow it, and then at the end of the day, they still feel broke. And this is when I really look at their relationship to their parents, especially their mother. And I also look at how they I really have a look at their birth story.
Mhm.
So imagine this. You are born into a little baby body, and the first 3 to 4 years, you don't know that you're your own person. You think that you are one with mom. And so you basically learn from the family that you were born into how life works. So you're learning how much love is available to you, what you need to do to get attention. You're learning how you need to be in order to fit in. So this information basically gets downloaded into you, and you learn it over the first couple of years of your life through childhood and through your teenage years. And so that obviously very strongly affects how you do life later on. So for some of you guys, if you come from families where you didn't get so much love, where it just felt like love was scarce, or sometimes your mom was there for you, sometimes she wasn't. And this can be, in some cases, it's just that maybe mom was a drug addict, maybe mom had a health scare, maybe mom was just preoccupied, maybe mom was having a hard time in her relationship with dad, maybe your mom has experienced her own traumas and it was hard for her to really connect with you. That oftentimes shows up in families where there was a miscarriage. So if your mom had a miscarriage before you, that could prevent her from really being able to bond with you. So what this tells you as a little child is love is not dependable. I can't depend that I'll always be taken care of. I need to fend for myself. So those beliefs can already start to show up, and in a way, your capacity to receive love and care is really small. Later on, as you grow up to be an adult, we kind of want the role of your parents to be partially replaced by money, so that money becomes this thing that allows you to move through the world without inhibition. And then we want money to be this thing that gives you a sense of stability and security. And we also want money to be a little bit of a source of love, and this thing that allows you to express yourself through the clothes that you wear and through what you look like and where you go and where you travel. So your relationship to your parents very strongly affects how you interact with money. Especially how you see your mom is oftentimes how later on people see money.
Yeah, and do you think that is really amazing? Do you think that this could have something to do with people thinking money's evil or bad, or um, having a real distant relationship with money, or not wanting to, you know, or just not wanting to, just like opting out from
Mhm.
making money? You know what I mean?
Definitely. It makes a lot of sense. So going back
Mhm.
to someone's relationship to mom or dad, we're just mostly talking about mom, but family systems are a lot more complex than that. So just for the purpose of this interview, we're just keeping it very simple and talking about mom a lot. But just as a disclaimer, many more dynamics actually affect you. But now that we're talking about money, if it feels like money is evil, my question is, have you ever rejected your mom?
Mhm.
Did you ever feel that your mom was evil? Did it ever feel like you couldn't fully trust the love that you were receiving because it always came at a price, or there was a catch somewhere, or it's this thing that you had for some time, then all of a sudden it got taken away. So oftentimes we reject money, or we reject the good in life, we reject a parent because part of us thinks that it'll keep us safe. So in a way we're thinking, it's not safe for me to receive all this good stuff that money could bring me. So I'd rather not even have it in my life.
So as long as we're rejecting our parents, we're going to be blocking sometimes that flow, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and this is where I sometimes rub people the wrong way as a family constellation therapist. So many of the things that we teach as family constellation therapists are a little bit controversial because we basically, what we teach is very much based on observation. So we don't really say, this is the way things are. It's more that we say, here's what we've observed. This is
Hmm.
what we found is a very strong pattern that tends to occur. It sounds like this pattern is in your family system as well. Let's clear it. So, it's just those are patterns that we've observed, and I personally very strongly see that it's really impossible to have a strong sense of self-esteem and really great finances, and at the same time rejecting a parent. Because, in a way, when you reject a parent, you're kind of rejecting parts of yourself
Hmm.
because you're half mom, half dad, and then half of you you're just rejecting and you say it's bad. So, all those qualities rejecting. So, it really tanks your self esteem in a way. And of course, we try to meditate this away or we try to read books as opposed to really going to the root of the issue, which is always the family system. And so if there's a stop and go in your money, if it feels like there's not enough money or you can't depend on it, it feels elusive, or you just feel like you're stuck at a certain level and you're rejecting a parent, it could be that in the process of rejecting a parent, you also rejected the flow of money to some extent. Because
Hmm.
energetically speaking, the love that you get from your parents is very similar to that support that you ideally would get from money.
Wow, that's amazing, and I don't think many people think about it that way. We're not really taught to think of money as being nurturing for our souls, right? But I mean, I prefer to think of it like that now because it just for me it makes life much easier. Um, but one thought came to my mind as you were saying that, Hannah, is okay, so this is the root cause, right? Really, if we're thinking about root causes for most anything that we go through in our life is kind of, relationship with our parents and at the time when we were young, our parents were like are basically gods. I was thinking about this yesterday when I was hiking and how it's like small things like abandonment, or the feeling of being abandoned. Maybe your parents made a mistake or they forgot, or like one time for me this what came up was like I got one time I was young and I think my parents might have gotten their wires crossed, and one thought one was picking me up, the other one thought the other was picking me up, and they both forgot, right? So I of course it was devastating for me I felt forgotten, I felt abandoned. And of course, if that happens, to me as an adult, I understand, there's things, but as a kid, you're like, it's like the end of the world. Like what, and so that shapes so much of what you bring into your adult life without you really even realizing. So I think this is an important work. And I almost wonder if like trauma later, that you experience with money, like losing money or kind of getting to a height of money and then like something like bankruptcy happening or the economy going bad or something, those things, or whatever happens as a traumatic event with money, could that be related to you trying to heal to some extent your relationship with your parents and it's just triggering you? What do you think about that?
Wow, that's such a good question. Um, so what I've noticed, and I'm in this really interesting position of having worked with close to 1,000 people, or maybe more than 1,000 people. I should account that at some point. But it's really awesome because I get to talk to so many different family systems, and it really allows me to see patterns. And it is true that sometimes there's some unresolved business in a family system where one person might have screwed over another in order to get a lot of money. Or um, one of the women I did a life coach training with, all the way in the beginning of my career, she came from a family of bank robbers. And
Oh,
it was
wow.
so interesting. And so as I was in this life coach training, I kept noticing how she was really out of integrity. Like her
Mm.
contracts were weird, and she kept promising things that she didn't really follow through on. And she was making all this money, not really delivering any value. And in the beginning, I thought, what's up with that? And then later on, as I became a family constellation therapist, I noticed, oh, she's following her family system.
Oh,
She's like
yeah.
still doing this whole, screwing people over for money, because that's basically what she learned needs to happen in order to make money, which was really interesting for me. Or sometimes what happens is that, let's say someone's uncle extorted a family out of a lot of money, and then that family went bankrupt and lost their house, and it was really tragic. So any type of screwing somebody over situation usually wants to be rectified by the younger generation, where
Mhm.
somebody in the younger generation feels like they need to make it right. So I once had a client who came from a very wealthy Southern family, and they had lots of family money for many, many decades, and they never really did anything useful with it. And the money came from, the way the money was created wasn't exactly ethical.
Mhm.
And my client came to me feeling like money was so evil, and she had all these ideas of how she wanted to help, because there was this deep, deep guilt in her family system around how they treated money. So, to answer your question, it is true that oftentimes younger generations want to rectify the mistakes that were made by older generations. And also, sometimes we follow our families by creating similar issues as them. So, if
Mm.
somebody in the past lost a lot of money very tragically, we might want to bond with them by doing the same thing in our own lives today, even though it's unconscious. A lot of the ways in which we follow our family systems and try to resolve this unresolved business is so deeply ingrained in us that we're consciously not even aware of what we're doing.
That actually makes so much sense to me because if I think about my own life and some things I've been through, um, I feel like what has come up for me as you say that is that my grandfather, my great grandfather, definitely. I didn't ever know him, but he had a general store during the Great Depression, and he had to. Um, he was just giving away the products and food for free because he knew people couldn't afford it, but he would put it like on a tab, and he knew people would never pay him back. But of course, he ended up losing his business, but he was, he was just trying to help people. And so I think that was a huge loss for him. And then also my grandfather, who was supposed to probably take over that business. It was a general store. And so I think after that, my great grandfather, he became an alcoholic and he got really depressed. I mean, my grandfather, sorry, not my great grandfather. Um, and so it affected him. And then it also probably affected my father because then my father, didn't really have much of a dad. And so now, like some of the things I've gone through, because I've always felt this deep connection with my grandfather who I've never met, but there's just this deep connection with him. And maybe that was a way for me, like some of the stuff that I've been through, like bankruptcy and, in 2008 crash, we went through a lot of trauma around that. Like I've talked to you about that. And, I feel like to some extent that was something that I was trying to connect with him on possibly.
Yeah, that's really so beautiful. We really want it. So, again, the most important thing for humans is that we belong to our families. And many of us go do that in very extreme ways. So, children of alcoholics oftentimes develop some kind of an addiction as well, even though they might say, I don't want to be like my parents. We might reject them, but then a deeper part of us just wants to belong, and so we do follow them. And by the way, we don't have to follow our families in these negative ways. It's just most of us don't know any better. So we follow them in ways that actually limit us, but it's also possible to bond with our families in more positive ways, which then frees us up to not need to do that. But in your case, it's really beautiful. And so it's also really interesting to see that you might be wanting to bond with your family system through also being an entrepreneur, because there are some entrepreneurs in your family. You might also want to go into a type of business where you get to help a lot of people. And it's really important for you to do that in ethical ways. And so that very strongly shows in how you run your business. And it's very clearly, the influence of your family system is so clearly visible. And in a way, it's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so it is kind of amazing if we become aware of these things, and we can kind of see it a little bit more of the big picture behind it and why, intention behind it, and if we're still trying to belong or still trying to fit in with the family system, I think that can be really empowering to like change that pattern, and okay, we have the ability to actually change it for the next generations to come, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful because many of those patterns get passed down from generation to generation. And it kind of makes sense because your parents aren't the way they are just so. They were affected by their parents, and their parents were affected by their parents. So each generation influences the subsequent one. And so this is basically how patterns and things get passed down to us. But it's also very much possible to break family patterns and to pass on new ones.
Yeah, and I feel like it's important too to bring up, even just like in your immediate family, like your mom and dad, for example, like we were talking about earlier, even like their beliefs around money. Are you taken on their beliefs as far as like, my dad, he's done really well for himself. He does a really great job at managing his money, but I don't feel like he taught me the skills that he has, and he I think some of them rubbed off, but also he has beliefs around what he'll spend money on. He's kind of frugal in some ways. It's really interesting. But then I kind of realized that I don't have those same beliefs. I don't have the same values around money. I'll spend money on other things that I feel are more valuable for me. So again, like differentiating and kind of realizing, okay, are we spending money, are we managing our money based on what we grew up with, what our parents beliefs and values were, have we created our new values and beliefs for ourselves around that, right?
I love that you bring this up. So, there are many different layers that I look at whenever a client comes to me and they want to work on money. So, the first most important thing is really the family system. It's foundational. Like if you can have a healthy relationship to your family, that's going to be the foundation for your life. So it's kind of this foundation that you need to stand on, and from there we can have you can help you build something. It's kind of like most people are trying to build their lives on a foundation that's like quicksand,
Mm.
and it just doesn't work so well. So if you can work on your family system first, really clear up any major traumas you've experienced with your parents and just work through your family system and clear up the biggest dysfunctions that already frees many people up to really relate to money in a more neutral way. So it's really just, figures, it's really just numbers, it's really just activities, it's just money. And then from there, your family affects you in a major way, but from there it's also what's your personal story with money? What are personal traumas you've experienced? What's the money download that you've received from society? Like, what did you learn over the course of your life? What are some downfalls that you've had? And then we also want to work through that personal connection to money. And from there, like you already said, it also requires some skills that most of us never learn. So just to say that there are different layers to healing your relationship to money that are all really, really important.
Yeah, and I think that you brought up a one thing that kind of you made me think of as especially I feel like I was definitely I had this mindset when after the crash of 2008, and I was really trying to rebuild my life after that. And now I'm seeing a lot of people, and mostly younger generation people, with this mindset that, uh, it's about money. People who have money are bad, and people who have who, big corporations are bad, and there's this thing that's going on in the United States right now where we're kind of heading more towards a socialism kind of construct, and people are wanting to and I think there's nothing wrong with socialism. I think there's some beautiful things about it, and it's really great because it helps to take care of people in your community. But I think at the same time, what I'm seeing a little bit of is people just kind of giving up their power to be able to create their own abundance, right? And just becoming, and this could be a little controversial, I don't know, but just be being victims. There's a lot of victimhood stuff I'm hearing lately, and I think it's because, I mean, it has probably to do with Trump being the president, and that kind of like character and narrative that's going on about money being evil. Um, and how we need to share it. But I think what's getting lost in all of this is that people are now, I almost think that people are losing sight of what they can do for themselves, like how they can take responsibility for themselves and accountability by learning more of how to use these skills to create their own abundance. Like they may not even realize the power in that, right?
It's so interesting that you touched on people's perception of money, where they say it's either good or bad. And anytime something like that shows up in a person where they say, love is good or love is bad, or governments are good, governments are bad, it usually points to the fact that it's a very limited childlike perspective. Because as children, in a way, it's okay for us to think of things as either good or bad. Many of us think of one parent as a good one and the other as the bad one, or maybe both of our parents are bad or good. And now, as adults, it's really important that we also add the second side of the story. So if it feels like money is just bad, okay, some of those points of view might be true, but then what's the other side of the story to just kind of complete the picture? And then, what I found is that most people kind of arrive at this place of, oh, so money is just money, and governments are just governments, and work is just work. It just is what it is, and I can actually use it in any way that I choose to. But
Mm.
oftentimes, when it feels like governments are just bad, for me, it really ties back to the family as well. So in my own example, I always felt like adults were standing in my own way. So I had a
Mm.
really rough upbringing where adults didn't really take care of me well, and I was sexually abused from the age of 7, and just authority figures were really taking advantage of me and putting me in very dangerous situations when I was a child, and I was really defenseless. And so later on, and I grew up in Germany, which is a really awesome government that has amazing social security and really so many initiatives to help people. Like college is free and healthcare is free, and all these things are just, if you're ever out of work, it's basically no problem, and you get a lot of government assistance. Just compared to other countries, it's still not perfect by any chance, but compared to other countries, Germany is very advanced in that way. And so for me, it was really interesting. So I grew up feeling like adults weren't trustworthy and kept screwing me over. And then that's what my experience was like with the government in my early 20s and in my teenage years, where I was entitled to certain types of government assistance based on the trauma that I've experienced and the hard time that I had in life, but it just kept feeling like the government was letting me down.
Mm.
And so at some point, I needed to take responsibility for that, where I kind of needed to ask myself, why isn't the government helping me? And I noticed, oh, my mom never helped me. My dad
Mm.
never helped me. My teachers never helped me. And this is kind of the mindset that I developed early on. From there, it expanded into money is never there for me. My friends are never there for me. No one's ever there for me. I wasn't even there for me, let alone the universe being something dependable. And so I really noticed how I was so deeply immersed in this limiting belief of I'm all alone, the world is dangerous, no one ever helps me, that it kind of caused these things to repeat themselves. And now, after I cleared this belief, it actually turns out that governments are just governments. There are good things about them. There are some things about them that we might want to improve upon, but it is what it is. So any kind of a strong emotionally charged reaction basically points me back to somebody having, some kind of a pattern or belief in their system that we might want to clear.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, that was great. I think that it is so important to, if we are getting emotionally charged about something, step back for a second and say, wait a minute, what is this about? There's got to be a deeper aspect to this, right? I think it's totally normal to feel like that in your 20s, and and especially with what you've gone through, Hannah, and feeling like you're, you know, I think developmentally it's a big step, and to start to kind of, you're kind of shifting, whether you were taking care of your parents or not, or they took care of you. You're stepping into learning how to take care of yourself as well. There's that aspect of it, and so I think it's totally normal to think, to get pissed off at the government, or to blame, outside people for what's going on, or because you're just now, again, you're learning those skills. Some people don't ever learn those skills, but hopefully today's show will help people and give everybody a little more insight on how that it is possible that you can learn these skills, right?
It really is. And then you don't have to be stuck in the same pattern so much anymore. Because
Right.
I noticed that for me, feeling like I was all alone in the world, it actually didn't help much. Like
Mm.
holding all this resentment towards the people who were supposed to help me but didn't, and who were supposed to be there for me but weren't. It actually didn't help. What helped was accepting reality as it was, and accepting my own power in it. And so part of me was like, oh my God, but if I take responsibility for this, like I'm going to condone their behavior, or it's just going to get worse, and I need to fight this, and I need to be mad and all that stuff. But in the process of doing that, I was really just wrecking myself.
Yeah, I agree. I felt the same. It brought about so much like resistance in my body when I would think that way. And it was almost like you were trying to control something you couldn't really control. Like you were trying to change something that really wasn't in your ability to change. Like you can only change, like, meaning like trying to go outside to change things instead of changing from the inside first, right? So, but yeah, I think the way the way that feels for me, it's so much more of a relief and so much more empowering to be able to, um, change my perception, like you said. And because if we keep thinking that it's someone else's fault, and we're not really getting to the root cause of like what we've been talking about, then I think that I feel that you kind of get stuck in this victimhood state, like a learned helplessness almost kind of state. So, which doesn't really get you anywhere. You just keep running around in circles, right?
Yeah, if it were effective, it probably would have worked by now.
Yeah,
And like, if any of you guys are listening and it really is effective for you, obviously go ahead. I'm just seeing that
absolutely.
in many cases, it just isn't as effective as we want it to be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. Okay. So I wanted to hit upon self-worth, because I feel like, also, I know we've probably touched upon that some in this conversation, but I want to focus a little bit, hone in on that some, because um, I know you and I have talked about you know feeling worthy of taking up space and actually being seen and heard is part of that. um, and of course that translates, self-worth translates into, if you have your own business, what you're going to charge people, what you feel your value is, or what you have to offer, what that value is. And of course, what you're magnetizing in your life, so your self-worth directly affects that. Can we get a little bit deeper into that, Hannah? And can you go into like what you how you teach your clients, or what you teach them about self-worth and how to develop that and where to start?
Mm. Oh, I love this question. So many things are coming to me. I feel like self-worth is this huge can of worms. It's kind of this issue that's behind so many things. So first of all, self-worth really very strongly affects the actions that we take. Because at the end of the day, we do want you to be clear from any limiting family patterns, and we want you to be clear of any personal patterns around money and beliefs as well to the best of our ability. As long as we're humans, we're never going to be perfectly clear, but just, the major things that hold you back. And then from there, it's about taking action. And so the question is, do you value money and your own well-being enough to do what is necessary to hit your financial goals? So, the quality and the amount of the actions we take is a very strong indicator to me of how much somebody values themselves. So it's kind of like self-love is the best motivator. If you love yourself and you cherish yourself and you value yourself so much, of course you'll take action. Of course you'll do what you know you should do. Of course you'll call people or raise your prices or send out resumes or ask for that money back that somebody owes you, whatever it is. So self worth is a very strong indicator of the actions you take. And then the other thing that you already touched on is, it also really shows in relationships. So for most people, business is a business of relationships. Without people, businesses don't really exist. And also for some of you who have jobs, you probably wouldn't really be able to do your job without other people because it's all, about people in some way. And then the question is, are you worthy of being in communication with people? Are you worthy of having them say yes to you? Are you worthy of receiving love and attention from them? Are you worthy of being connected to them? And so for many people, this entire conversation already pushes many buttons around self-worth.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, and I think we're all dealing with that on some level, right? It's very common, especially, and I think running your own business actually brings it more out into the forefront, especially if you're selling services. Even after all these years of selling services to people, I still run into these, issues, right? Some issue triggers for me, like I've told you many
Hmm.
times. But yeah, I mean, even just constantly reevaluating your value and what you're offering people because it gets bigger, right? Like,
Hmm.
and then you have to expand to that level.
Yeah, and something that I so appreciate about many of my clients and yourself included is this very strong value of I want to be in integrity. I want to
Hmm.
value myself correctly. I want to make sure that I have the right investment for my programs and what I sell because I don't want to rip people off and like this needs to be in alignment. And so oftentimes that really pushes our own self-worth buttons in a way I think that's really beautiful because many of the people that I attract have problems with self-worth, and then there's this other group of people that have problems with entitlement. Like it kind of
Okay.
goes both ways. Millennials are said to be the people with the biggest entitlement issues, where it feels like I deserve all this money and life should be easier and it should be further ahead and I should be an Instagram superstar and money should come to me easily and I shouldn't have to work much and all those shoulds. It really to me points back to a sense of entitlement and feeling like the world or your parents or your job or your spouse or whoever owes you something. And so that's kind of the other side of the coin. And then that can also sometimes, I notice with people, in my industry, where people take it a little bit too far, where they say, oh, money is just energy, so I can just charge anything for this program, and
Mm.
value is in the eye of the beholder. So kind of doesn't matter what I provide. And if people don't get results, well, then, that's their problem. So this is kind of the other side of the coin. So sometimes when my clients come to me with self-worth issues, it's obviously something we want to work on, but it also comes with this really big blessing of being very mindful of our pricing and of how we interact with our customers and wanting to be respectful. And that's something I really kind of love about this whole self-worth issue. It also kind of points to us just really genuinely loving our customers.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Really loving your clients and loving how you're helping them. And I always feel like, especially you've taught me even more how to support my clients better, and I appreciate that because it actually makes helps me enjoy my job more when I'm able to support my clients and they get results. That's fun for me.
That makes me smile. And I personally have this belief. It's just my personal belief, but I have this belief that everything in life always balances out.
Oh
It's
yeah.
something I've seen in family systems. Like if somebody trespasses against another in a generation, somebody else always wants to rectify that. Like at the end of the day, it always balances out. Like everything just kind of neutralizes after some time. And I
Yeah.
feel the same is true in business. So sometimes when I see trends in the business world of, the latest thing that I've really noticed is people being out of integrity. And then a couple months later, I hear that somebody lost their house or somebody had a very big launch and then they got a ton of refunds just because their programs didn't actually deliver much. And so it is tragic for somebody to go through something like that, but I also kind of feel like at the end of the day, life is fair and there needs to be a fair exchange of value between the customer and and it doesn't mean that people can't make a lot of money. It just means that it needs a little bit more substance.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think it's interesting to just plug out of those trends and just go back to business essentials, which is provide really, really, really good value and charge a good amount for that.
Yeah, and it has to resonate with you. Like you have to be in line with that, what you're charging. It just can't be like what I've learned from you. You can't just like pull it out of a hat and, because you'll feel it. You'll feel if it's not right. You'll be like, oh, this feels weird to ask for this because this doesn't, I'm not aligned with this, right? Whether it be too high or too low in either direction, right? So that's what I think is really interesting is that if you can just listen to your higher self, or your body will tell you as well if something doesn't feel right. And I've noticed that in myself um if I feel uncomfortable asking for something, or I feel like overwhelmed because I'm undercharging for something, I can tell the difference, and I'm like, yeah, this is not right. And you'll see too, I've seen as well, you'll get clients when you're asking the right price. It'll be right, it'll be aligned, and you'll get that coming to you. So it usually works out, like you said, it usually balances pretty well.
I do
Yeah.
really see that too. There is a sweet spot in pricing. So sometimes
Mhm.
my clients, and you know that, Allison, you guys bring me a couple different price points for what you're trying to sell. And we do a little constellation on that. So constellation is what we call healings and family constellation therapy, which is really where we see what's the sweet spot pricing that's best for the client, where the client has really a lot of skin in the game. So a lot of the pricing
Right.
that I teach is we want our clients to have skin in the game and actually use what we sell them. Because if they don't use it, they won't get the result, and that wouldn't be very loving towards them. So we do want them to pay a good amount that really helps them make use of what we give them, basically. And then the other thing is, what's the sweet spot for you that allows you to earn a really healthy amount of money and grow your wealth and feel really abundant, basically have the surplus of money. And there is a sweet spot that everyone can get to. And I love what you said about, it getting tricky if we charge too much or too little, because it just kind of clogs up the channels of abundance in that way. It's like clients can't find it, or it's just confusing, or it doesn't work. So it really has to be the sweet spot. And sometimes, I hear of clients who've worked with business coaches before who just said, oh, just double the amount or triple the
Mm.
amount. And for some people, that actually works. For many people, I found though, it doesn't work because it goes against what's normal in their family systems. So if
Mhm.
nobody in their families have ever charged that amount of money per hour or per product, or have ever received that amount, it's very likely that it's not going to work out. So we kind of need to find that sweet spot and also tie it in with a family system that someone's from. And from there, people can start to take steps and expand their money. It's just, it's like what you said, just pulling a random number out of a hat for many people creates lots of problems.
Yeah, exactly. Also, if you're trying to just charge what everybody else charges, or what people in your industry are charging too, that can be a problem. So I think just tuning into yourself. And also I love what you said about holding your clients accountable, like, because again, if they're getting your service for free, sometimes this works out, but a lot of times in my experience it doesn't, like especially in the fitness and nutrition industry. Like, they're not gonna they're not gonna follow through unless they're paying the right amount to do that, right? They're not gonna own it, right? So because these are behavioral changes, these are lifestyle changes, and so they have to there's a level of accountability that has to happen. And so and people aren't going to really always follow through with those things unless they are being charged for that, in my experience. So yeah, so you know, I just love that you brought that up, because that's an important point to be made, and a lot of people in my industry also don't think about that. And I used to not think about it that way, but my client actually, I just went, I changed a little bit of the structure of what I offer, and it's and my client was like, oh, okay, I see. You're holding me accountable now for that part of it, the nutrition part of it. And like, she goes, I wouldn't do it otherwise if I wasn't being charged for it. I was like, that's true. So she realized it, right away. And I was like, yeah, that's a great point. So, again, we're trying to, we're, I, in my opinion anyway, it, it's like I'm trying to go about it with my client's best interests in mind, and to get them the results, what they're coming to me for, what they're paying me for. I want to help them, guide them through the process so they can get those results that they desire. So for that, the right price is essential.
It really is,
Yeah.
in conjunction with a healthy dose of self-worth.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they're worth spending the money on too. That's the other thing to think about. Like, for me, working with you, with just hiring a coach, like, I'm worth it. I'm worth, hiring a coach for. Like, spending this time on myself, I really value that. So I'm going to spend that kind of money on myself, right? And so that spills into self-worth, and how much you value your own time and your own self-growth, and that kind of thing too.
Yeah, I love that you said that because we can really kind of look at where money goes every single month, and then that gives us a picture of what we value most.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's important to be aware of too, for sure. Um, all right, Hannah. Well, is there anything you'd like to add before we close up here? Because I feel like this has been such an incredible conversation, and I know you have a lot of things to get to, a lot of clients to get to today. But I really appreciate your time here today with me again, as always.
Oh, I appreciate you too. I'm so happy we got to do this today. And it's funny because I'm sure we could have kept on talking about money for the next 5 days because it's such a complex topic.
It
I just really
is.
was grateful that I got to touch on family because for most people, that's really the missing piece.
Yeah.
And from there, it's kind of really the foundation that is needed to even get somewhere. So, yeah, thanks so
Yeah.
much for having me.
That was incredible. And do you have anything, like, I know you have some webinars that you've done in the past around magnetizing money. And of course, if anybody listening is interested in working with you, they can find you at hannabier.com, and I'll reference that link on the show notes. But is there anything else you'd like to add, Hannah, and where they can find you locally or online?
Yeah, so like you already said, my website is hannabier.com, which is HANNABIER.com. And on my website, you can email me, if you guys just want to get my personal opinion on what's going on in your lives. So sometimes I know it can be a little bit confusing. We're like, I have this poltergeist syndrome. I don't know why. I don't know what to do about it. So, in that case, you're very welcome to email me and I'll get back to you personally. And you're also welcome to schedule a 30-minute call with me, just to hear more about how I might be able to help. I would love to do that. I also have a money masterclass that's about healing your relationship to money that I can give you a little bit of a link and a discount to that for any of you guys who just feel like, oh my God, yes, I have some stuff with money. I would like some help. If you guys just want to have a little bit of an introduction and already start working on your money mindset, I can give Allison a link so you can check that out as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate it so much. And I'll talk to you again soon.